Good evening, darling. Please make yourself comfortable for tonight's story. The genius of the Erlenmeyer flask, used in laboratories the world over, is that it's quite easy to pour substances into it, but it's difficult for those substances to splash back out again. This is good for the scientist, but must be frustrating for the chemical. One of my worst fears is the idea of walking into a place freely and casually, not a care in the world, only to then discover that, for whatever reason, I can't leave. If you've ever felt well and truly trapped, even if only for a moment, then you know it's one of the most frightening feelings in the world. Tonight's story combines these two elements in a way that I hope you'll enjoy. Let us venture into an Erlenmeyer Tunnel. I once worked in a modern office building and, being the curious person I am, I considered myself fortunate that I was not tied to a desk and could visit many spaces that were off limits to others. Riding the freight elevator was an adventure because the ride was bumpy, it was dark inside, and we could fit 12 people in there, which made it almost like a carnival ride. I got to see many hidden storage spaces where we found buried and long-forgotten treasures, like merchandise branded for popular movies from decades past. As time went on, the employee population grew, and we had to avail ourselves of more of these tucked-away places to store the various goods we acquired. There was a hidden space under the fitness center, another concealed beneath a stairwell in the lobby, places I'd walked by 100 times without noticing they were there, places I never would have guessed were there at all. It got stranger when we finally had to resort to the basement. We were still a level above the boilers and all that, but the basement felt different, like we truly sunk down to an older, more primeval space. Most of the walls were plain concrete, while others were exposed brick. It was never bright enough and always too quiet. We found an architect's model of our building, under glass and so much dust, from the 1960s. There was a box of pen and flag sets for executive desks, but the flags only had 48 stars. I never saw mice, but I was sure that I heard them. I never felt we were alone. When I mentioned this to my colleague, she shrugged, not looking at me. "You'll get used to it," she said, sounding annoyed, and not the least bit curious, whereas I wanted to explore everything. There were always more doors, some modern push doors, and some that looked much older even than the building. Bronze double doors inlaid with ornate designs, vault-like doors with iron gates laid over them, and many others. And indeed, these doors likely were older than the building, because there had been a succession of structures on that spot over the last 2 centuries, and different combinations of buildings had been connected via their basements and sub-basements over time. Regardless of their age, however, and without exception, each of these doors had a badge reader that controlled access. Whenever I saw one of these mystery doors in the dark recesses of those hidden spots, I would swipe my own badge, but the doors never opened for me. A friend of mine had worked down the street a few years earlier in a building dating back to the 1850s. It was a printing and shipping company, and in her time there, she'd often had to go down to the first basement to retrieve supplies, with the offices being on the upper levels. After she'd been working there for a while, her co-workers took her down to the second basement. It was clean and well lit by modern fluorescent lights, but it still felt like something from another world. The walls were exposed brick, the doorways were arched, the floors were wooden, and in one corner was a trapdoor, double padlocked. My friend asked where it went. Surely the owner knew, but nobody working in the office did, and so it was a source of much speculation. But imagine if, by some fluke, you find yourself in this situation, and in a rare stroke of curiosity paired with luck, the small door in the corner or the trap door in the floor is not secured, and so you step through, finding yourself in a place that is clearly old but still feels rational. There's more exposed brick, more arched ceilings, perhaps a brick floor recently swept clean. Maybe there's even a runner laid out on the floor, with working Edison lamps hanging from above to guide the way back. But you don't return. Instead, you are led on by your desire to know what waits down here. The passage stretches on for some time, then rounds a corner. You realize continuing this way would lead you from your workplace altogether. Where could it possibly go? You should probably go back, return to your duties, and let someone know about this potential breach in security. And yet, you also know there might never again be such an opportunity to explore. You continue down the passageway. It's very dry and much colder than the sunny day outside, though not uncomfortable. It feels surprisingly clean, but perhaps that's only due to its isolation. It would be hard to dirty up such a remote space. You round the corner and find yourself at a landing, lit by a large and elaborate ceiling light, almost a chandelier, really. Doorways to the left and right have been bricked over, though a stub of a tunnel remains for one of them. A stairway used to lead up from here, but it now retreats directly into a brick ceiling. But the stairway leading down is still open. It's wide, almost elegant, with curved wrought iron railings on both ends. The stairs are dark, but light comes from below, though the light has an odd greenish tint to it. You descend slowly, and as you do, moisture returns to the air. You can hear rushing water like a great river, and then you smell the water too. It doesn't stink, it's not the smell of sewage. It reminds you of summers at the lake. The place you emerge into is neither a street nor a mine, but it reminds you of both. The scene is lit by rusted electric lanterns set at even intervals, only some of them still working, casting their weak glow. Before you, a wide brick avenue extends in both directions, though it's become warped and uneven, undulating like a wave as it recedes into the dark. All along it are grand archways with names above them. You recognize many of the names: Cumberland Building, Club Marmaduke, Napier's, East Athletic Club. Names that were still in circulation in your childhood. Names of beloved and historic landmarks that were demolished in the decades before you were born. Some names are carved into stone nameplates in bold block letters. Some are declared in signage that looks to date from the early 20th century. You step out onto the avenue and look up at the arch you just stepped out of. Fontainebleau reads the sign above it in a sweeping, elegant font. You recognize that name as well. It was a famous hotel and restaurant that stood where your office building was until the 1960s. You can just make out in the dim light the telltale signs of water damage on the sign, drip marks, mold stains. You run your hand along the brick face of the arch. Most of it's cold and dry, but eventually your fingers find places where icy water runs steadily down. Some of the archways are bricked over. A few are blocked by cave-ins. Several blocked by iron gates that look so rusted you think you could probably push through them if you had gardening gloves to protect your hands. And a few, tantalizingly, lead upward, though only the one you've just descended from has light spilling down from above. The others are dark. Perhaps these dark stairwells are bricked over somewhere above, or perhaps not. Kirkpatrick's read the signs. Flamingo Room, St. Anthony's Hospital. There are places where rows of barrels are lined up neatly, or crates are stacked. You see a wheelbarrow at one point, and a push cart that's sagging because one wheel has rusted off. You do a double take upon hearing the notes of a piano, and indeed, there is an upright piano pushed against a wall, or the remains of one anyway, with the sound created by a large rat running across the ruined keys. Its glinting eyes regard you for a moment as if asking, "What are you doing here?" You are definitely not alone. The sounds of life are stronger now, mice and rats. But you doubt anything else unless cats or bats have found easy passage in and out of this place. The sound of rushing water is stronger now. Have you moved closer to the river? But it seems more likely the sewer. It did rain heavily the last few nights. All that water has to end up somewhere. Perhaps it ends up here, wherever here is. You walk for a long while, taking it all in. After a time you see an archway whose sign reads Bell Laboratories, and you notice something piled up in its sealed doorway. There are lanterns mounted on either side of this portal, but neither are working, so you have to get quite close before you realize what it is. You don't gasp or cry out, but simply stare at the object numbly for a moment, surprised but not shocked to have found such a thing. It's a skeleton of a man. He is wearing the remnants of a tweed suit that looks like it dates from perhaps the 1960s. A pair of thick-framed glasses lay nearby, one lens cracked. From looking at him, there's no way to tell what caused him to die down here. It's simply evident that he did, and that he's been here ever since. You've been wandering down this avenue in a sort of daze, entranced by the shock of finding it, by the calls from the past, the sheer spectacle. And that spell isn't entirely broken even now, but finding the corpse has brought you back to reality. You need to go back. You need to tell people what you found. You need to tell people where you are. And above all else, you need to make sure you don't wind up bones down here yourself. You start to walk back, looking always to your right for the one archway from which light streamed, and always looking up for that mouldering Fontainebleau sign, just barely visible in the gloom. For a long time you think it must be coming up at any moment, but then you begin to think, surely you must have passed it, so you backtrack, only to find yourself back at the Bell Laboratories archway with the skeleton. Then you must not have gone far enough, so you walk further and further and further, but even after some time you have not seen the pool of light or the sign for the Fontainebleau. You keep walking, eventually finding one archway with a light from within. Your heart races hopefully, but the moment you look inside, you know this isn't the way you came. A horrible smell hits you at once, a smell you'd forgotten. As a child, on hot summer nights, you'd sometimes catch the scent from the stockyards in the older, poorer part of town, even though it was miles away. It was the smell of meat and death and boiling blood, the worst smell you ever smelled, and when it came, you knew all the people who lived down that way were closing their windows tightly, even though it meant they would half sweat to death in their beds, because that reek was something that made you gag until you were red-faced and blind, even if you'd lived with it your entire life. The stockyards closed up when you were young, so you'd forgotten about the smell, but now it comes back to you as it rages full force from within the tunnel. The tunnel is like an old abattoir, filled almost to the ceiling with bones. The horned skulls and massive pelvises of the cattle are easy to discern, as well as the smaller, similar skulls of what might be pigs and sheep and other things. The blood, if there'd ever been any here, dried up or washed away long ago, but the stench of death remains. But then you notice that it's not just bones in the tunnel. Further back you can make out something man-made, mechanical, a large pane of glass, a headlight. It's a streetcar. The back of the tunnel is lined with them. You can even read their destinations: Uptown, Little Italy, Country Club, and stockyards too. You take a few steps closer, curious despite the stench. You've actually stepped over a few bones, your fingertips touching the dusty glass of a flat windshield, before you notice the countless skulls within the car staring back at you. Human skulls. The streetcar is full of long dead people, crammed into their seats in their moldering clothes like rush hour in hell. You smile involuntarily, almost chuckling, because this is a step too far, and it makes no sense. No one would place deceased people in a streetcar, and surely there was never a day when a streetcar full of passengers up and vanished. Was there? There couldn't have been. You turn and walk away, determined not to think on this any further. It's not for you to figure out. Rather, it's a signpost, indicating that you couldn't possibly have passed this way before, and that you've gone much, much too far. You would have noticed the smell, which means you've been walking the wrong direction all this time. So you turn around, eventually passing the lone skeleton outside of what was once Bell Laboratories, and you keep walking, For an uncertain amount of time, you keep walking. Inside, you know you must have gone much, much further now than you walked initially, but you tell yourself it's just a bit farther, and that the lingering abattoir smell is only in your imagination. Eventually, you see another lone archway with light coming from it. Instantly, you pick up your pace, despite your fear, your exhaustion, your uncertainty. The light looks off, almost orange in tone, not how you remember it. You don't look up to see if the hotel sign is there. In truth, it doesn't matter, so long as it's an exit. You can hike back to the office if you need to. This story will be worth any strange looks you get upon walking in the front doors after vanishing during an errand to the basement. Except the light isn't coming from above at all, but from a hallway that leads straight back. The staircase leading upward is demolished, sealed off. You instead must take a level passageway that leads behind the staircase. Still, it's lit by a series of exposed bulbs hanging from above, most of which are in working order. This seems a good sign, even if the amber light they give off seems to date them to another era. At the end is a heavy utility door, like the one you passed through at the beginning. You push on the rounded bar that stretches across the door, and it's cold and wet to the touch, but the door opens. Your first impression of the room beyond is that it's very dark, but not pitch black. There is ambient light from somewhere, but like the brick avenue, it's faint and almost greenish. Still, along a back wall, you can make out a row of computers and monitors on pushcarts, and that seems a good sign too, even if the equipment appears to be from the early 1980s. You walk into the room and head in the only direction you can. There's noise up ahead, office noise, a printer perhaps, like the old dot matrix kind, the noisy ones, and a rhythmic whoosh accompanied by a flash of green light around a corner, like the scanning of an old copy machine. You laugh nervously. Perhaps this is where the old Xerox building used to be. A smell hits you, and it's awful. It's a hot smell, like food, but rotten food. There's definitely conversation, though, just around the corner, and you try to focus on that. Conversation means people, no matter what they're eating down here in the dark. One of the talking people laughs, but the laugh sounds wrong, almost hysterical. Yet you keep moving toward them. What else is there to do? Then someone grabs your sleeve, hard enough to halt you. You turn, finding yourself just inches away from another face. The person is dressed in a frilly white blouse and a knee-length plaid skirt. It looks like something one of your aunties might have worn in an old photograph. She has an ID badge pinned to her blouse, but it's too dark to read it. Her clothes look stained, moldy. The hand gripping your sleeve is cold and wet, soaking into your shirt. You can feel each bone in her hand. Her skin is so thin and it's slippery. Is that why she grips so tightly? But her face is the worst part. She wears eyeglasses, but you can still see her eyes. One is dark, sunken, small as a bean. The other looks bloated, infected, milky. Just a few curly grey hairs, also wet, stick to her forehead. When she opens her lipless mouth, her teeth are like sticks, and they point backward into her mouth. They're like the teeth of a fish, teeth meant to tear, to rip. She has barely any nose at all. It's more like two long nostrils, too long for a human face. She looks at first to be average height for a woman, but it's hard to say for sure, as her back is badly hunched. Perhaps she's much taller once properly unfurled. "My goodness," she says, and it's the voice of an old woman with a throat full of water. She smiles, showcasing that row of needle teeth. "Is this what the young people are wearing nowadays?" She pulls on your sleeve, hard, bringing you close. You cry out in alarm, and then you're screaming as she is upon you. I never thought it coincidental that Venus, the goddess of love, was said to be the most beautiful, while her husband, Vulcan, the god of work, was said to be the ugliest of the lot. Work, when it isn't also something that you love, can be a very ugly thing. Yet I hope tonight's story illustrates that No matter how poor your day at the office was, it could always have been worse. I hope you'll be back for our next story. Until then, don't forget me, n'est-ce pas?